Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Oh, I never get bored of saying that as I intro a pod. And today is a solo episode. And for a while, on the lead up to Christmas and New Year, I was certainly tempted to create a New Year, New You type podcast. And then I felt I'm not sure what the best way to construct that would be. Because, of course, there is almost a lot of, I guess we'd say, taboo around the new year being a time where you can set new intentions. So around that sort of thought process of new year, new you, and people starting their maybe fitness journey or different ways of living as you enter a new year and what that's going to look like for you. And of course, the taboo surrounds, when it's a new year, shouldn't you just already be doing things that you're looking to start in the new year? But I certainly myself believe that this time between Christmas and New Year is a great time to reflect on what you found challenging during the year, so 2023, what you've also achieved, things that maybe you think about in a different way, how your mindset has evolved, and what that's going to potentially look like as you enter 2024. And every year, I write down those types of thoughts and feelings around what I want my next year to look like. And I certainly feel like there's just something very cathartic around entering a new year. It's like, okay, that year has gone. Hopefully you're feeling like you've learned a lot of lessons that are valuable, and then the new year starts. So today's episode is going to be centered around how I personally had some big reflections, as I always do. If you listen to the pod, you know that I've had many revelations, particularly in 2023 and since moving to Thailand. And Christmas in itself has always been a challenging time for me since becoming a bodybuilder. And I want to share with you some of the revelations, reflections that I've had in hope to resonate with you guys. You know, that is always a big driver for me. When I talk on the solo episodes, there's a lot of feedback from you guys that listen to say thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing what I'm going through or what reflections I've had. And I personally feel like when I listen to podcasts myself and in the past, the real personal ones really do help you understand the podcast host, but also you can draw into, is that person similar to me in certain ways? And it can be incredibly useful. Also, even if it's a different trail of thought, you can also gain some insight into certain things that you're maybe thinking about yourself. So before I start talking about this Christmas period for myself, a thought process or a saying, I don't know what would be the best way to describe it, but something that has been ringing around in my head is the easiest thing I did in 2023 was to allow the fear of other people's opinions to hold me back. Now, I'm sure people can resonate here, right? And then an extension of that is actually, if you are acting or verbalizing in a certain way that is true to you, and yes, I'm not saying, if I'm being a dick, then that is not the vibe that I want to carry over and talk about. But if I'm acting with true intentions, if I'm being an honest and authentic person, why do I need to worry about other people's opinions? Because opinions are not facts. We can either take them in or we can let them go, and that is up to us. But on the flip side of that, I've spent my whole life trying to fit in. And certainly within these reflections around Christmas time, and actually I've spoken to Dan, who listens to the podcast and is staying over here in Thailand with us, about through my whole life, and particularly around being a bodybuilder, I've always found it quite hard to make true friendships. Now, if you meet me or you listen to the podcast, you probably assume that I've got lots and lots of friends and I find it really easy to find friendships. However, I always had this undercurrent of maybe people don't understand me, or am I weird? Am I different? Why don't people operate on the frequency I operate in, per se? And for me, that resides to being very inquisitive. So if I am starting or forming a relationship with someone, I truly want to understand that person. I really want to get an understanding into their past, their present, what their ambitions are. And I felt like as I came away from my marriage and when I was trying to find new friends, bodybuilders mainly, that a lot of the time I was told that I was too much and I was experiencing pushback on being my authentic self. And when I ask questions about someone, it truly is to get to know them more and understand them. Honestly, for me, really understanding someone is something that I value as a person and I value in a friendship. So, of course, when we look at this realistically, this is not always going to be accepted by someone else. Maybe me asking questions that could be a trigger, or it's about past issues or problems. Maybe that person doesn't want to speak about that, and that is absolutely fine. But this resided in me, like I say, feeling like maybe I'm not going to make real friends, and a lot of my friendships will remain superficial. And I didn't want that. I didn't give up on being myself, but I certainly did dampen the version of me unless I was in a comfortable environment where I could just be fully myself. And that is a full-on person. But I feel in a good way. I always feel like I can bring a good energy, I can lift others. And when I say about, you know, the easiest thing I've done in 2023 is to allow other people's potential opinions hold me back, that was coming from this type of background of not being good enough, of not fitting in, of feeling like I'm very different to other people. And that's not me wanting pity or, going, oh, I'm different. People should accept me for how I am. It's not that at all. But what it did was it made me feel like maybe life was meant to be a solo endeavor. But as I've been able to accept myself more and the value I can bring, let me tell you, it's been a very life-changing experience. And now the friendships that form moving forward are very different. I'm accepted for who I am, and I feel like I attract different people, and that's through the podcast and that's through real life, as it were. And it's a very, very fortunate position I am in. And as I move into 2024, my intention, my main intention is to not shy away from being who I am, because my intentions are always good. I want to help other people have a voice. That is so true to me. It's literally in my core. And the podcast has helped me explore that. The level of guests that I'm getting on, people that I never thought would spend their time with me. And then their feedback is that they loved podcasting with me. All ways of, I guess, empowering myself to stay true to who I am. So let's talk about what Christmas brought for me. And I did a poll on my Instagram story, and the vote was to do the solo podcast. So here we are. Now, for me, spending 12 years as a competitor so far, it's been extremely valuable for the creation of who I am today. The structure, the routine, the purpose, the education, the exploration of my physique. I'll never, ever be able to put into words what that has brought me as a human being. But that has also yielded some internal thought processes that are extremely detrimental. And I believe that talking about this on a podcast that is talking about bodybuilding will be helpful for you guys, because when we get into this realm, the continual pursuit of progression is, if you're really passionate about this and you really do care, it's on your mind every waking moment. And even when you sleep, when it gets close to a show day, you're waking up dreaming of the show and this type of thought process. So it's not even just when you're awake. And let's bring it back to what I just said. When you care about something, when you really, really want to pursue something, that comes with an element of, for a lot of us, self-doubt. Are we ever going to be good enough? Are we ever going to be able to achieve things that we feel that could be a possibility? And I was able to show myself that that was possible by pursuing bodybuilding, by going from not placing for 2 seasons, then getting a placing of 6th place, and then, of course, leading into my most successful season in 2019, where I climbed up to winning Miss Universe. And the reason I want to mention that is because that continual need for progression and want for progression, the day after the Universe, I was in the gym doing cardio, feeling that I was not lean enough, that I was still not a good enough bodybuilder, and that there was more meant for me. I could still get leaner. It was the end of the season, but I still felt the need to go and do cardio at 5 in the morning, fasted, thinking, I want to do better. I want to do better. And that gives you some insight into some competitors' mindsets. Even when you get an accolade, I lifted the Miss Universe trophy, I gained that title, it still brought an element of what is next and what can I do to do better than this? How can I be a better bodybuilder? And when having my check-in call with my coach Tom today, he said to me, I don't need to tell you how you are a successful bodybuilder, but you still have elements of doubt that you can be a better bodybuilder or you can succeed more. And that is certainly an internal thing, and it's something that I need to work on. So when we talk about Christmas and how I looked at this, how I approached this is a personal endeavor. And I remember years and years ago, I got told by a bodybuilder that I spent time with, he said to me, bodybuilding is for 364 days of the year. You always have Christmas Day off. So from a younger bodybuilder mind, I was told that this was the way. And always at Christmas, I was told by my coach, this is a time to enjoy family and friends, being there, making memories. But because my own food behaviors, my own thoughts and feelings around food, and how I would essentially not have control around the off-plan type vibe, that led to Christmas being a very, very difficult time for me. But I always remember this saying as to, you've got to almost put bodybuilding aside for this day. And there's only been one Christmas that I tracked in the past, and that was because I was in the middle of a prep and I tracked my Christmas dinner. And I actually vowed to never do that again because of the impact that I felt it had on my family. So now we take it to 2023. I'm in Thailand. I'm in my own new environment, and there is zero, when I say no, external pressure. And I decided that actually what I wanted to do was eat on plan. So the test here was, could I maintain control around a day that in the past myself, I've not been able to do, apart from that one that I did in the prep. And the reflections I've had recently are that I really do love my daily food plan. I love the foods I eat. I've been eating the same foods for around 3 months every day. I've actually started to increase it as I go further into my growth phase now. Now I'm back training again, and I've been addressing my back injury that you may have heard me talk about on the podcast and on my social media. So the food I eat every day, it's honestly delicious. I look forward to every meal. It's intentful. I could eat more. I've got a good capacity for food, but I don't want to. I feel satiated. I feel happy. I eat 4 times a day, and I'm honestly so fulfilled. So the decision was to eat my normal foods on Christmas Day, and everyone around me was eating your Thai cuisine, this type of food. And in a way, luckily, I know this is ironic and I've moved to Thailand, but I don't really like Thai food. I've had a couple of dishes back home that I quite enjoyed, but I don't particularly like, your noodles, spices, lots of different meats that I'm not sure on, this type of food. So what was great was I didn't have any thoughts around, I wish I could eat that, because I don't actually like the food, and some of the food my digestive system doesn't tolerate. So eating my normal food was great. And we got to the end of Christmas Day, and I was literally like, this has been my best Christmas yet. I was so fulfilled. We laughed hard, we created memories, we had fun, and I didn't exhibit any food pathologies. I didn't feel uncomfortable at all. And the best bit for me, guys, if any of you have done this or do this around self-restriction and essentially purging through cardio and extra exercise, the next day I woke up and I didn't need to go and do a stupid amount of steps, a stupid amount of cardio to almost get rid of the thoughts of eating in excess, of that making me a bad bodybuilder or a bad person, and to just get out of the house. Because what I would find previously was there'd be all of this food and it would make me feel incredibly pressured. I actually got to the point over the years where I would cook Christmas dinner, and I'm happy to say it, guys, because I don't need to hold this back. I would make my own separate portions and I would put them on the table near me. So I would serve the food and it looked like I was having what everyone else was having, but I would use fry light instead of olive oil for the sweet potatoes. Or I would, do little things that essentially are diet hacks to enable myself to bring down the calories so that when I was eating much more than I needed to or wanted to, whatever we want to call it, I felt that it was a little bit easier to maintain some control and not over consume on calories to the degree that I would if, say, I was having things cooked in olive oil compared to fry light. And these sorts of things and these sorts of hacks are things that we pick up as bodybuilders. I'm sure there'll be people listening going, yeah, I do that, or I've done that, or I've thought about that. Again, this is why I want to talk about it, because I've lived in my own head through the whole time of being a bodybuilder, of not being good enough, of doing everything in my power to be the best bodybuilder possible. And like I say, even lifting the universe title, that still wasn't enough to validate it in my own mind. So when I go into this Christmas, being able to stay on plan, for me, that was a personal victory. And that's something I'm going to remember forever, how good that felt. And it was just such a good day for me, because what I've also realized is that being happier in my pursuit, enjoying my foods, I don't have the food focus I used to have. And it's been hard to work on this, guys. This is not me saying something, that's going to happen overnight per se. And if you've listened to my previous episode talking around dealing with my food behaviors, it all started then, this sort of epiphany, this moment where it was like, holy shit, I think about food all the time, about measuring the food, about is my food looking aesthetic enough? Have I cooked enough food for the next few days? What time is my next meal? Have I got everything ready for that? And it monopolized my whole life. And now I sit here talking as almost like I'm in recovery from having, I'm unsure if it's a food disorder per se, but more like a disordered eating and a way of thinking and acting, of course, things like self-restriction. And it feels like I'm in recovery because I'm in control now. And it's so fulfilling for me because I can spread this message particularly around, people that may be coming away from bodybuilding or want to change their lifestyle for a certain period of time. And I can tell you that you can still progress, you can still pursue bodybuilding without being neurotic. Because now I eat my meals, I train, I've got a newfound passion for training because I can now train properly again since having my treatment on my back injury. And I've never trained without pain. For 12 years, every single session, my back has hurt. And I'm in a place again where I can now talk about that without it feeling like I'm weak or, people will think I'm moaning about it or make opinions based on me talking about it. And really, if someone feels negatively about me talking about my struggles, then that's not my problem. What I want to do is talk to the listeners, to resonate with the listeners, and be able to express that you are not alone with certain thoughts and feelings that happen as someone pursuing bodybuilding, whether that's as a competitor or a bodybuilder. We all have these little things that we end up, they come into our thought process when we want to do well. So you start to do little things and you maybe don't realize. And this is where I always say, normally, when you feel these levels of neuroticism, or you're really, really into something and you struggle to socialize or you struggle to come away from routine, it's because you care. So now, what does this look like for me? Having established this routine, having it set, knowing what foods I eat on the day to day, knowing what training I'm doing, how do I then be able to embrace social occasions? So this is my next challenge, a personal challenge, because I have definitely found myself back in a routine, very much like what a prep would look like. I eat at around the same times every day, which I'm able to be a bit more flexible around now. I eat the same foods every day. I train on the same days. I do my steps generally around the same time in the morning. How does it then look to try and socialize when I thrive so much in structure? And that is going to be a challenge for me. It certainly is. Now, I have no worries that I'm going to feel the need to overeat like I would have in the past. No worries. And I'm actually quite excited. So tomorrow we're going to go for a barbecue, a fresh barbecue with some of our really close friends. And Dan being over here, who I mentioned earlier, we want to make memories with him. And, like the other day when he first arrived, I trained later in the evening, which is something I don't generally do because I like to train after my first meal. But I got so immersed in the conversation, and that was hours and hours and hours of talking, that I made the decision, okay, I'm happy with training later today. So that was almost like my little warm up to try something a bit different. And we actually spoke about it. And I said, I'm certainly someone that likes to front end my bodybuilding tasks. So I like to do my steps fasted. I like to have my first meal. I like to go to the gym, and then I do my work blocks. So I've started to challenge myself on this thought process as well. And I said to Dan, I have thought about maybe some days I'll do an evening walk instead of a morning walk, just to almost allow myself to be a bit more adaptable as a bodybuilder. Because let's face it, guys, we can't compete forever. Well, maybe we can, maybe we can. But, realistically, am I going to be a competitor as I grow older and older? No, but I want to be a bodybuilder. But how does that look? How does that look if I decide to have a child? How does that look if I travel? How does that look if things are thrown at me in life, if I'm so set in my structure and routine? So the challenge tomorrow is my first meal out with friends since being in Thailand. And I spoke through it with Tom, and it's ideal for a bodybuilder, right? So we're going to go, have lots of different meats, maybe some rice, something like this, some salads, etc., etc. So this is certainly going to be a personal challenge for me because, like I say, I'm really into this current routine. And it's a bit like around Christmas when you see the reels and the posts saying, don't neglect your family, enjoy foods that are off plan, immerse in that time. And there's two ways to look at this, right? So, yes, it's important to make memories, but something that I speak to all of my clients about around Christmas is, what does enjoyment look like to you? So, is it food, or is it making memories with your family outside of eating in excess? Is it playing a board game and laughing so hard that you cry? Is it going for a dog walk with your whole family? Is it sitting around the table and reminiscing about certain memories? And yes, of course, it is cheered around this time of year to incorporate different foods and social occasions. But is that really what you want to do? And that's what I had to ask myself. What do I, Sarah, want to do before I consider what everyone else wants to do? And what this is proving to you guys, if this is a thought process you have around social occasions or anything like this, is, what do you want to do? What do you enjoy? And that's my question to you. And then, how does that work in a social environment? So, like my example of Christmas Day, I made my own meal prep and then we ordered food in for everyone else. None of my people sitting around that table questioned me. No one needed to look at what I was eating, ask me about what I was eating, because we were all there together making memories. And this brings me on to the second part of this podcast today, where I want to talk about external pressure. So for a while now, I've noticed a bit of a trend, and what gets the most traction on my own social media and what gets messages from listening to podcasts. And for me, I certainly feel like external pressure is one of my strong points to talk about. Not only the amount of external pressure I've had in the past, but also the way that I deal with it and cope with it myself as a bodybuilder. And what I want to talk about today and share with you guys is almost like a process, should we say, of what I go through when I'm dealing with external pressure as a bodybuilder. Now, it's not so prevalent now because I have a new environment, and really on the day-to-day, it's just Matt and I, and he lets me do my thing without questioning me. Of course, he has input and he does ask me questions, but he doesn't question me, there's a big difference there, right? So in the past, when I have faced external pressure, so the comments of, what are you eating? Are you eating that again? Do you have to do this? This type of thought process and these sorts of questions and opinions that we do come across in social scenarios, what I tend to do is do almost like a 3-stage rule. So initially, the person that you are facing external pressure from, first of all, what is your relationship with that person? And is that person's comments coming from a place of care, or is it maybe jealousy, or is it miseducation? So there's going to be very different scenarios that you're going to come across. So let's use some examples here. So on this first stage of dealing with an external comment, if this is my mum saying, what are you eating? It's because she actually wants to know what I'm eating and what phase I'm in as a bodybuilder. And it's very, not superficial, but I don't need to go into, let's say, macros, etc. But I can talk to her about what phase I'm in and why this meal is appropriate to my goals. And she's very invested in that. Now, if it's someone that has tried to lose weight in the past, they're in and out of the gym, they try and get into fitness, but they can't stick at it, is there potentially elements of an undercurrent of jealousy or a bit of a pushback because they are not able to do what you're doing? And that's okay, right? We don't need to get angry or upset about that. But what we need to understand is that actually you going into what phase you're in, what the food is suitable for, why you're eating these foods in detail, is that going to help? Probably not. This may be different person dependent, but really, is this going to help the scenario, or is it going to potentially lead to more questions or a flippant response, which is what we don't want. Then if it's from a place of miseducation, so if someone else is bodybuilding and they follow a different way of doing their food or their training or whatever it is, this can of course raise questions, and potentially they want you to buy into what they do because they maybe have a coach or they follow a certain protocol and they believe that is what's best. Again, is it going to be a good idea to go into why you're doing it, what your coach has said, why you don't want to do it the way they do it? Or is that going to end up being a confrontation that you don't really need? So when we look at that assessment on this sort of stage 1, what is going to be worth you going into? What level of detail? So do we keep it fairly superficial? Do we allow this person to say their comment and then you stay in your own lane? And the response that I would use is, I'm in a prep or I'm in an off season, this food is suited to my goals and I'm happy with what I'm eating. Normally that doesn't raise too much of a response and they sort of think, oh, okay, I think I'll move on with my day, because it's assertive, it's confident in your approach, and you really don't need to go into much more detail than that. If it's someone that's invested in your journey, like my mum, I can go into it a little bit more. If also an extension of that, it's someone that's in the physique development realm, but maybe they're not a competitor or they're just getting into it, that might be incredibly useful for them, for you to go into levels of detail where it's like, this is fascinating. And you can normally tell with a response, if someone looks like they're going to fall asleep, or they start looking away, or they maybe don't ask any further questions, maybe they don't really want to know as much detail as you're sharing. So this would be my first way of tackling external pressure. Now, if that same person says the same thing again, I would stick to a very similar response, but try and be a little bit more confident and assertive when you respond to their questioning. So it might be that one day they've said, what are you eating? The next day, do you have to eat that? So it may have escalated and become a little bit more negative or seen as negative. So the response, I told you, I'm in prep, I'm happy with my food choices, and I just want to be left to eat my food. So again, you're offering a level of assertiveness and confidence in your approach, but it's a slightly different way to tackle it. So like I said before, I'm happy with what I'm eating, I'm in a prep, I just want to eat my meal. And then you can sort of see that they may be taking on board a little bit more, that actually you're saying, look, I just want to eat my food. So it's a bit more on that assertive vibe to try and make it clear that this is what you're doing and you're happy with what you're doing, right? This is a choice, remember, guys. So then if this happens a third time for myself, that is that point where it's like, this person needs to leave me alone if it becomes detrimental to me. And potentially, you know, off the back of this, is it going to lead to you wanting to eat privately? Is it going to lead to you feeling self-conscious when you eat in front of this person or these people? Is it going to make you feel uncomfortable? So if it is, this is where the assertive level needs to go up even more. So the next question comes in, or the next comment comes in. And the way that I personally deal with it, and I have dealt with it in the past, especially in a work environment that isn't with other bodybuilders, is, I've told you before, I'm happy with what I'm eating. Please, can you not make any more comments? Simple as that. To me, that doesn't seem unreasonable. But in our own minds, that would feel like we're being rude if you're quite a conscientious person, if you're a caring person. And that's what I struggled with for many years. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't want to come across like a dick. And I don't want to be that person that no one wants to talk to because, oh, she's in a prep again, she doesn't want to talk. But we've got to look at the bigger picture here, guys. If we're being questioned on the reg and we're receiving comments from people from external points of view and it becomes detrimental to yourself, how else can we approach this without almost giving those warnings? Now, the reason I do this staged approach is that you're not just going in and saying fuck off. You're allowing that person to realize, okay, so this person's happy with what they're doing, this is what they're eating, this is the phase they're in. If they then continue, you're allowing that second port of call to go, look, I have said to you before, I'm happy eating my foods. The third approach is definitely much more assertive, and it's going to come across in a different way. If you're able to master that, now I understand this is difficult, guys. It took me many, many years to be able to deal with this level of pressure. But then when we tie this into my experience at Christmas, I didn't have those pressures. So again, if you're in environments where there is pressures, if there's external noise that causes you to feel like you deviate from your plan, that you have to act or behave in a certain way to suit other people, that's of course down to you to assess that environment. So if that environment is a working environment, then can you get out of that? No, but what you can utilize potentially is my 3-stage protocol, or whatever we want to call it. Everything as a bodybuilder is a protocol to allow some dominance and assertiveness around your pursuit. Because I've eaten my lunch in the toilet so that people will just leave me the fuck alone. And that isolates you further. It makes you feel like you're doing something wrong. And what are we doing here, guys? We're trying to improve our physique. We're trying to eat well. We're trying to challenge ourselves by doing something like a prep or an off season or whatever phase you're in. So that being met with negativity is never nice, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. We all want to be liked. It's not nice being disliked or talked about or any of those behaviors that we do encounter. But what is worse in my mind is the internal self-talk that you feel when you face external pressure, when this becomes detrimental to your own mental health. Let's face it, if you're in a working environment 5 days of the week, for 8 hours a day, that's a lot of time to live as a shell, to try and satisfy others, to hide eating your food, to not want to talk about bodybuilding. It becomes very hard on your mental health. And I'm talking from personal experience. This is not me saying that everyone listening is going to resonate, but I'm sure there's going to be little bits that you will pick up on that could be relatable for your circumstance. And this is why it's important to talk about it, because remember, if you can act with true intentions, if you can reside with your own value set, if you know what that is, and you can really take cathartism from being able to come against external pressure, it really does help your growth as a person. And what is also a very useful thing to mention here, once you do it once, that 3-stage rule with one person, you're very empowered. And then it becomes so much easier, I promise you, because when it happens and you've already done that in that environment with one person, it becomes so much easier to then control yourself and how you respond to comments in these similar scenarios. Because if you're assertive, if you're confident in your response, people do start to get the picture. And yes, like I say, it's not easy, but with practice, we're able to then facilitate more confidence in being able to come against external pressure. And what I would also say, and I will finish it here, is as we enter this new year, if there is struggles, if there is obstacles and challenges that you've faced as a bodybuilder, and if there's anything I can delve into on the podcast, an episode that talks around external pressures from certain scenarios or certain people, or even if I can raise it on a podcast with a guest that could be helpful for you guys, please do let me know. But this is your almost New Year, New You episode, but in a slightly different way. And it's, of course, always super valuable for me to share my own insights, my own rambles into what it's like to be a competitor for so long, and the pressures that we do come across and how I've been able to get through those. And if you did find this helpful, of course, on Instagram, my inbox is always open. And I want to take this opportunity to say Happy New Year, guys. And I cannot wait to spend 2024 in your ears. Hey!